Up, everyone? Today we're going to be talking about HCG versus Kisspeptin, what they do, and the effects that you could have from them. So, first of all, as far as HCG or Kisspeptin goes, you can experience paradoxical effects where not only does your body just stop responding to it, but you can actually have the opposite effect over time. I would say for that reason, start off your doses as low as possible. Like as far as your Kisspeptin goes, I've seen I've seen people start off as low as like 25 micrograms, much less than 200 micrograms. Because yeah, if you take the 200 microgram stuff, you can crash very easily. Um, Obviously, if you're taking other medications, you can experience paradoxical effects because Kisspeptin can mess with a lot of your receptors, especially if you're taking stuff that also binds those receptors or also can affect those receptors. The same goes for HCG. HCG can do the same thing, although from my experience, HCG did make my balls bigger, whereas Kisspeptin increased my sex drive. It did increase my energy overall, and it did make me more, I guess, just like physically active. However, with my condition and just because of the fact that I've taken a lot of psych meds over the years, I've also taken Wellbutrin a lot of times over the years, so I did experience some pretty insane receptor damage to where I could only take like HCG or Kisspeptin for about like 2 weeks at a time, and then I would just totally crash. However, with both HCG and Kisspeptin, I did manage to have kids on, while I was on it. Take for that what you will, I mean, at least confirmed. I mean, I've honestly nowadays, like for a very long time, I just don't bother with relationships. I do kind of hump and dump, and that's just kind of the way it's got to go for a lot of people now, a lot of guys nowadays, like don't bother with relationships. I mean, I want to see my kids, but they always have excuses for why that is, and always have excuses for that. So just don't bother. Don't bother with like paternity or child support or whatever. If you are on the hook for child support, I would definitely get a paternity test. Just saying, it's a little off topic. But as far as my experience with HCG, I was running about 250 IUs twice a week, bumped up to 500, eventually bumped up to 1,000. And I started having problems when I was taking 2,000 IUs above and above for even once a week. I did that simply because I just want to slam the whole bottle at once and not worry about, having to, like store it or refrigerate it or whatever. However, I did experience some pretty nasty crashes from that. Like, just, I started having serious paradoxical effects. So my balls got super cold, shriveled up, lost a bunch of muscle mass. Obviously, yeah, my sex drive went way down. A lot of stuff went way down. Mind you, I was taking bupropion and hydroxyzine at the time, so that may have, interfered. Because for those of you that don't know, Wellbutrin is kind of a dopaminergic substance. It's dopaminergic medication, whereas hydroxyzine is anti-dopaminergic, so it's an antagonist to the receptor. Um, I was also hooked on Risperdal for a little bit of that time. Really messed up story. I don't want to go into detail about it now. I will say that that was the result of being in a pretty crazy relationship. And she started accusing me of having all kinds of problems. And I went to, got a 5150. Long story short, this is why I tell you guys to don't get involved in a relationship. And that's why I would say for most of you guys, do not try to pursue romantic value. I'm going to do a separate video on that. But as far as your romantic value, it's going to be much more based on face, like facial aesthetics. And women typically prefer a leaner and more kind of a skinny look and like a good face for, relationship material, boyfriend material. Whereas for like, hookup material, one night stands, casual sex, whatever, women are going to be looking at a lot of different things. So they're not going to like hyper fixate on face. They actually prefer a more muscular physique and like kind of a more filled out face, a more muscular face. I did notice that, one thing with the Kisspeptin is my skin tone kind of changed. It did change, like more so the undertone, not so much the like overall. I mean, it wasn't like getting a tan or anything like on Melanotan, but the Kisspeptin did change my skin tone a bit more. HCG did to some extent. HCG did make my balls bigger. HCG did. I was shooting a lot more cum at the time. Just saying. So if you guys want to do it, you can look into that. As far as muscle mass goes, I actually had more on HCG, whereas on Kisspeptin, my lifts were better and I had a lot more endurance. So, um, as far as like me taking, I did make the mistake of taking cabergoline at the time, which really also messed me up. So the bupropion, the risperidone, the hydroxyzine, and with the cabergoline on top of that, my my dopamine receptors were fried, like completely just wrecked. Which anything that interacts with your androgen receptors, your Leydig cells, your pituitary gland, anything that like affects your androgens in your sex drive, if you're taking dopamine substances with that, you're really gonna crash. I mean, you're gonna crash either way, but I'd really recommend staying away from Caber or Caber, Wellbutrin, hydroxyzine, anything that interacts with the dopamine receptors. Although I would say for Caber, if you're taking one of them just by itself, like standalone, or with Tren or Deca, that would be a good choice. I personally not a big fan of Tren. I've taken it a few times and I did experience some good stuff. I was more thermogenic, like I had a higher body temperature and my skin undertone did change as well. However, with the yeah, so back on the HCG versus Kisspeptin, I did like both of them quite a bit, but it was just kind of bad timing because at the time I was crashing super hard off of both of them. It was probably just because I was taking a lot of other meds at the time, and I was just, oh my god, dude, it took me years to fully recover. It took me like 3 years to fully recover, after running a lot of stuff like detoxing and resetting my receptors and everything else. So, you can take this all with a grain of salt as far as, storing them in the fridge. I would say I would actually keep the Kisspeptin at room temperature just because you can crash so easily off of a high dose. And if you have like the 10 milligram vials in that tiny little, like it's like a 3 ml vial. So trying to get like 100 micrograms or even 50, it's like it's really pulling teeth and like splitting hairs. So, it's just, it is what it is. Now, onto HCG, I would say it's pretty good. Obviously, I would definitely look at contraindications with other stuff. I'm going to be going into a whole video on paradoxical effects, and I will be including sources. So yeah, that's about it, guys. Well, this is Looks Max Rendezvous. We're checking out, and we'll see each other next time.